Naka, and welcome to For the Record. The Fiji Police Force, its policing initiatives, and some of the drawbacks and recent incidents have been highlighted in the media and have been a topic of discussion around Fiji. So tonight with us in studio is the Commissioner of Police, Major General Ben Groenewald, to talk about the force as a whole and some of his incentives for the future. Also joining us on the panel as usual is Joshua Tuere from the Fiji Sun. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here tonight. Commissioner, special welcome to you. Starting off the show, as we reflect, you're nearing a year in the position as Commissioner, and when you came in, obviously there must have been some challenges that you identified and which you've been working on over the past 12 months. What would you say was the biggest challenge for you, and have you been able to overcome it?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. It's indeed a privilege for me because I will be turning my first year in Fiji on the 14th of months after I have served more than 42.5 years in the police in South Africa, retired as a Major General. I came here with an objective view, and I'm in a position now to reflect what happened the past year. Yes, it was not without challenges. I think the major challenges that I did experience the past year was organizational challenges as well as operational challenges. If we talk about organizational challenges, we are in a process with my inner core to review the whole structure of the policing. These people have a structure that, to my mind, is not a proper democratic structure. So we started off within my own office, where I recently appointed 2 deputy commissioners. One will be responsible for operations and the other one will be responsible for administration, and then they will have their own subdivisions under them. A part of that, we are also looking into the structural changes of our police stations. The principle that they implement here is the fact that all police station officers are on the level of inspector. I'm of the opinion that you must classify your police station in terms of your community and the crime committed in that. And then you classify your police stations as an A, B, or a C category. That means that an A category is your biggest stations, and you can appoint a higher level police officer. So the moment when you appoint a higher police officer, you have more command and control, and you have a longer span of control down to your charge room, so that you have more senior people in a charge room, and that is where our most of our problem started in terms of complaints against police and complaints against service delivery.
Would you say in the last 12 months you've had the force, your men and women rally behind you? Was there a period of adjustment? Was there any opposition?
Yeah, we must accept that is inherent, that people resisting change. But I think it has been accepted very well. We are in a process of implementing, and it has not been implemented fully. But I have the support of my inner core, as well as those divisions that I already visited and explained to them the reason for this change. That is organizational change. In terms of operational changes, we have a few critical issues. Number one is that we have a lack of resources. For an example, at this stage I have a 42% of my vehicle mobility. Now, you cannot work with a 42% of your vehicle mobility. For an example, a detective branch has 21 detectives. They carry 15 to 50 case dockets between 21 of them, so that it's times 50. Then they have 1 or 2 vehicles. 21 detectives, 2 vehicles, who work and who look. And that is a challenge. Linked to that is that I have a problem in terms of the competency skills of most of our low-level investigators. So we are in a process in cooperation with bilateral agreements that we have with other countries to upscale and train all these people. The training is very near to my heart. I've been in the training environment for almost 10 years of my life, and I feel very much dedicated to see that we reactivate our training to train our people to a better quality, to do a better quality of work.
One more question. Organizational issues, operational issues, lack of vehicles, and the competency or lack of that you spoke of. How did it affect service delivery? What level or what percentage of work were your men and women supposed to be doing, and what was the actual output?
One of the critical we have in the Fiji Police 7 KPIs, key performance indicators, and one of these KPIs is service delivery or complaints against police. Now, complaints against police and complaints against complaints against service by the police is very high at this stage. Now, it means only one thing, that the principles of democratic policing are not properly implemented. The fact is that the principles of police is not a new thing. In 1829, when Sir Robert Peel established the British Metropolitan Police, he set specific principles, and those principles are still today applicable. The problem is that many of the police forces in the world disregard these principles, and that leads to a delineation between the police and the public. If there's no trust by the community, then you have problems of complaints against police. So in terms of getting the principles of policing back within our concept of community policing and the Duavata concept, that is why we are busy in reviewing the Duavata process also to include other ways of community involvement. The quicker we can get trust back between the police and the community, we can address most of our crime problems in Fiji.
Commissioner, that's the end of the first segment. Joshua, sorry about that. We have to take a break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Our guest tonight, the Chief Executive of the Fiji Roads Authority, Neil Cook. Before the break, Neil, you mentioned the confidence that the industry has in the FRA and the work that's going on. I've noticed that a lot of local contractors are now being hired for some of the work that's going on. Is it that they're able to now meet the requirements of the authority in terms of the quality of work? What's actually happened? Is it that there's so much to do that you need more contractors?
Probably a combination. There's been a number of local contractors who have been involved right from the start. They were employed as subcontractors to our maintenance contractors, and they continue to do that work. So through that association that they've seen what we're expecting, and the successful ones have adapted. They've improved their training of their staff. I think everyone can see the vast improvement in traffic management across Fiji. We're not there yet with everything, but that's one example of the transfer of knowledge and improvement of practice that's come about. So on the back of their general increase in capability from working as subcontractors, we've then seen a number of those local contractors bid for work in their own right, particularly on our rural roads contracts, which are a lot less complex. They still require a level of capability, but not as complex as doing a major project in an urban environment. But we have also had successful local contractors, particularly on footpaths and curb and channel type work. So look, we're very pleased with the progress some of them are making. Those that were unable or unwilling to meet the standards that are being set for a modern roading industry, they're finding their work elsewhere. Where that is, I'm not too sure, but they'll be keeping busy on things that don't require quite the same level of capability as what we expect.
And given what you've said, you would stand by the quality of work that's being done right now. Have there been incidents where you've had to go back and tell your contractors, no good?
Oh, look, absolutely, but make no mistake, that's not a Fiji issue. That's worldwide. Every project has the potential for things to go not quite right. And I think with roading in particular, we need to understand that you're not dealing with products like, for instance, gravels that are 100% reliable. You can do sampling and testing and you think everything's okay, but you can get a little patch of that isn't quite right, and you can get failures soon after construction. So, these things happen. This is not, that's not necessarily a reflection of poor construction practice or anything. It can be, but not necessarily. And so we have had issues. We have had issues with the local Fijian contractors. We have had issues with the New Zealand contractors. We have had issues with the Chinese and Malaysian contractors. That's not unusual. That's why we are here. So they do their job properly first time, but if they don't, and when things inevitably go wrong from time to time, someone's there to take them to account and get it redone. And the beauty of having private contractors is that it's at their cost.
Have you penalised any of these contractors?
Or
is it just that they have
the penalty is built in. Mm-hmm. The rework is done at their cost. So if they have to go back once, twice, 3 times, they get paid once. And that's a big part of their motivation to do it right. Mm-hmm. Do it right first time.
You have a massive budget, and that's Fijian taxpayers' money.
Absolutely.
And what guarantee do you have in terms of checks and balances that every dollar spent will be money well spent, and this is in the context of corruption and ongoing concerns?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Fiji Roads Authority was established right from the start to really try and minimise the ability for that to happen, and to address problems that were seen in the previous regimes. So there's a range of things. We have very, very strict processes around tendering, very transparent processes. Every tenderer knows how we're going to evaluate things, whether that's primarily on price or whether there are other factors that we're going to give a weighting to. We have independent oversight of tender processes in some circumstances. So for a major contract, we will actually engage an independent probity auditor to overview what the evaluation team does. When we get into the contract proper, there are multiple layers of checks and balances. The supervising consultants are independent from the contractor. They're independent, engaged by, but independent from the FRA. They certify payments to a contractor. Then we have people within FRA who are checking and approving that. So again, another check and balance. We then have a range of audit regimes within FRA. We have what you would typically see as a financial services consultant doing audits on payments and such like. We then also have specialist contract experts who will come in and look at a project from top to bottom and give us advice on anything that looks like it needs to be addressed. And then coming in right over the top of all that is the fine Office of the Auditor General of Fiji, who audits us every year for a financial audit, which addresses those, the vast budget that we have, but they also do other audits, compliance audits. Are we sticking to the policies that that are in place.
So if the Auditor General decided to turn up at your office, say, this afternoon, can you confidently say that all your books are in order?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, the auditor, the Office of the Auditor General is regularly in our office, and rightly so. We understand the accountability that's upon us. We definitely understand the significance of the trust placed in the organisation to steward that money effectively.
All right. With that, we will take another break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to For the Record. Dr. Reddy, before the break, you were telling us about essentially how teachers and principals go out and select students in these 3 boarding schools.
Teachers who were students of these 3 institutions before, the All Boys and All Girls Network, the alumni, and the principals. They are the ones. Now, what had happened is that over time, because this network of All Boys and All Girls, the alumni, has increased, now their children have taken over the spaces in the school because they're in such a large number, the network, the alumni. So, which means that they're kind of taking over the space. Secondly, they moved away from meritorious student in academic-wise towards identifying students who are performing well in rugby and athletics, etc., and taking in. So initially the idea was for these schools to be a center of academic excellence. It has gradually moved away with the dilution of the application of the selection criteria, and therefore moving away from a center of academic excellence to a center which will house the children of the network, the alumni. Therefore, depriving of the rightful place of those 60% of the students who should originate from rural and maritime. That has happened over time. And as you can see, QPS, this year, only 26% of the students originate from rural and maritime. Rightfully, 60% of the borders should be from rural and maritime.
So what you're saying is this is not a new policy altogether. This is what you're doing essentially is an audit to see whether they're in compliance with current existing policies in the ministry.
Absolutely. I'm saying, look, at least let's get back and comply with the existing policy, and then see how we can, if there is a need be, to expand the boarding facility to cater for more students if there is a need be for maritime and rural. I'm saying if we, at the moment, if we comply with the existing policy, there's no need to even expand the boarding facility. But what we have said in the ministry, we want to expand the boarding facility. We want to expand the quality of the overall infrastructure at these 3 institutions, so that we provide them with the excellent learning environment to the student. And there's no restriction with respect to day scholars, to the extent that we are thinking of actually providing a bus service from Suva and Nasuri town to these 3 institutions every morning and afternoon.
And that would cater for the urban students?
The urban students, the meritorious service students who would want to kind of experience boarding life and mixing around with the rural and interior student. So what we want to do is to kind of encourage day scholars. So we also are looking at an additional stream in all these 3 schools from year 9 to year 13, an additional stream, so that day scholars can come and frequent the place and take part in or interact with the boarding students who 60% supposedly should originate from rural and maritime area.
I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the show about how this decision has been getting a lot of attention from the opposition party, so much so that the Prime Minister himself has come out and spoken about the merits of this decision. I should point out at this juncture that we had issued an invite to the opposition leader, Lutimu Kepa, to be part of the show tonight to speak with Dr. Reddy face to face. Unfortunately, at the last minute, she was apparently called away to other pressing arrangements and could not make it to the show. But that being said, Dr. Reddy, based on your research and how you want to bring the schools back in line with their policies. Are there any truth to these claims that it's going to erode the Itoke and affect the education of Itoke students?
Absolutely not. Unfortunately, the honourable leader made comments in public without undertaking research or without actually coming to us and consulting on whether it's a new policy or whether we're trying to implement the existing policy the way it should be implemented. Absolutely not. In fact, we want to provide opportunity, as the Prime Minister has said, to every Fijian to access quality facilities with respect to education. And here we're saying that in areas where, in the maritime and rural interior, where there's no high school, we want those students not to drop out or stay home just because they're not able to travel long distances to attend the schools in the proximity. To come, and we provide the boarding facility, and we look after them from year 9 to 13 and get them to the university. That's the whole idea. We don't want to attract students from areas where there is a school, because we've invested a lot in establishing this infrastructure. We have got qualified teachers. It's not, as you know, it's not easy to get qualified teachers with numerous reasons. But what we want is to provide opportunity to those who otherwise would be denied access to high school. So that's what we want. So it is not about. It's not about anything to do with the chiefly system, etc. To the contrary, they are chiefs in the maritime as well. They are chiefs in the rural area as well. But we want to ensure that all those people, whether they're chiefs or commoners, they are able to put their child to school via the boarding facility, which otherwise might discourage them and the child.
There have been some concerns about any proposals to lower the admission criteria in terms of marks to the schools, and this is in the context, about how the ministry is going on about merit-based systems. How do you justify that? Are these concerns genuine about lowering the standards of QBS?
Absolutely not. On paper, they say that they'll be admitting meritorious students who would get 80% and above. But to the contrary, that was not the practice. That's what I'm saying. That was not the practice. The practice was that the children of the alumni will be taken in, immaterial of the mark, as long as
regardless of marks.
Regardless of mark. Number two, they will go and sit in this athletics meet and the sporting events, etc., and identify students who are performing well in this athletics and track events and rugby, etc. They'll entice the student to come and join. Or the teachers who are teaching in primary school will identify students and say, you're a good performer in athletics or sports, etc. You should go to RKS, QBS, or ACS. So that actually diluted the idea of having a Center for Academic Excellence for Itoke in particular. That diluted that. That initially was the idea, is to provide a Center of Academic Excellence for students originating from the chiefly families initially and then from the Itoke community. But over time, the practice of our own staff in the ministry and the principal and the network resulted in diluting that particular notion of having a Center for Academic Excellence.
So what you're saying is basically, let's go back to this merit-based system, 60-40. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that at least for next year, let's go to the 60-40. But we're saying that if we find that the student, let's say, coming from the Flagstaff area, over 3 miles, Nambua, it's our duty. It's a responsibility of the ministry to find a space for you here, a school closer to your home. That's our responsibility. You come and tell us if General College is not taking your child, or MGM is not taking your child, or Rishikul is not taking your child. We will get you a space. That's our responsibility. We're paid to do that. So what we're saying is that we don't want to create an infrastructure, put the teachers there, full stream of teachers in every area, and then say that the student won't study there, will go and study somewhere else. So what will happen is that we will not have minimum scale of students there, and we're not having full load for teachers.
It's time for another break. Welcome back. We're talking about piracy and the problems it causes. Before the break, Terence, you were talking about how this new trend has emerged of people showing up with flash drives and downloading content. Now, so far as we've spoken about piracy, it's largely been about movies that come in from overseas. What you're talking about now has a larger impact on the local market. We're talking about local artists.
Absolutely.
Losing out on their rights.
Absolutely, and you've got situations now where people like Simon Vatalevo did his own recording. He's kept it close to home. He doesn't want to give it to anybody to distribute because he's scared stiff somebody's going to copy it. You've got Seru Serevi with a new album. You've got Lysa Volokoro, the same. And there are other people that just have recorded albums and they won't put them out because they just don't want to be pirated. And you get someone like Seru who gets really, really angry and wants to go around punching the pirates. And I'm saying that's not the answer. But it's shifted from movies. There's an attitude that's developed. If I can make some money out of it, I'll copy it. And I think that's the pirate's mindset. He doesn't care what he copies. And what's developing, the big danger in Fiji is that people don't care about copying car parts. They don't bother about copying something like this hair gel. If there's money to be made, they'll do it. So we have to develop a framework of stopping people freely ripping people off.
Just as a matter of interest, how much money are we talking about in the piracy industry in Fiji per month, for example?
Well, we know roughly now because we know exactly how many blanks are available to go to the pirates. And I gave an example of one particular pirate who could easily be clearing $1.2, $1.4 million in 4 months. Now, we've already talked about 350 and all the internet shots. You're looking at probably an industry that's worth over 20 million.
This is on an annual basis.
Yeah, and this is a cash business, and that's one of the things where I think that FIRCA, we've given information to FIRCA and they've gone around because it's a cash business. They never give you a receipt. If you ask for a receipt, you've blown your cover. They don't give you a receipt, and the bookkeeping that these people, they don't have any bookkeeping system. They burn, they sell, they burn, they sell.
So going into the future, if we are to curb piracy, why don't we just close all the DVD shops overnight, all 350 or so?
Well, you can't without prosecuting them. That's why the law is there. In a sense, the law protects them from all being closed down. You've got to go through the due process. You've got to prosecute them. In order to prosecute them, you've got to go down this track of gathering the evidence, going to court, giving them a way to defend their actions. And it's all very much weighted in a sense to allow them to carry on doing it. And that's why I would prefer to see as another solution where you get fined for infringement. I mean, what's the difference between a DVD shop that's breaking the law and a cafe that's not obeying the smoking laws, a taxi driver that doesn't have a taxi license? All around, you've got licensing systems in place.
We just don't see it as a crime. Fijians don't see it as a crime. Is that part of the problem?
Well, it is part of the problem. But how do we solve that? We solve that through education. We solve that with building this awareness program that we've got. So we start off in schools. And they understand. They understand that they have something to give to the community. And when we did these programs, we ran a poster program. And the quality of the response to copyright was amazing. It was intelligent, it was creative, emotional. So they know what the subject matter is, but by doing that, they have learned that they have got something. Sometimes people haven't realized they've got something. The guy that suddenly designed something, oh, it's worth something. I don't have a job, but I mean, give you a quick example. I used to do in New Zealand, looked after the collection agency. So 4 times a year, I would be signing a check for a local artist. And the local artist in this case was Big Runga, who was quite popular. I would sign a check for her, and it would be for three grand. Then the government changed, and Helen Clark came in. And Helen Clark decided she would be the Minister of the Arts. And she said, national identity, we want to build a national identity. She went to the radio stations and said, you have to come to us for your frequencies next year. Well, you're not going to get your frequencies easily unless you change the amount of local content. And at that time, it was 5%. Within 5 years, Big Runga was getting $30,000, not $3,000, 4 times a year. So she actually got a living wage out of her music.
You talked about local artists like Seru Serebi, Laisabul Koro, sort of going out of their way to protect their own intellectual property and their music. Obviously, on the table, you've got an example of one trader who's actually brought a complaint about his product being duplicated or copied.
Copied, yeah.
Do you want to go into that and explain what you have on the table here?
Well, this person, this guy from Bar, first of all came. He had 4 of these, which he's done all this himself. So he's worked out a formula for gel, and people use a lot of gel here. So he had a successful business. Somebody else saw that he was being successful, so they got hold of the formula. I don't know whether they got hold of the formula here or they just sent it offshore, but it went offshore and it came back in the thousands at half the price.
So this is
a genuine one. No, this is the pirate one. This is the genuine because on here it says keep away from children. And the reason that's on there is really straightforward, because if that's not so clear, but if you get the yellow jelly, this looks like strawberry jelly. You put your finger in there, but the concentration of caustic soda in here is high enough, if a child puts it in their mouth, it's going to seriously damage their throat.
And that's the danger of piracy now.
Yeah.
That's a new danger of piracy.
Yeah.
So
and this is not just this. Yesterday, I was in town yesterday, and there's a guy selling stuff on the just by the Triangle, and he was selling a variety of things, cheap sunglasses, socks, but he also was selling aspirin.
So why isn't this copy being stopped at our borders?
You tell me. Because how can you do that unless somebody is what the border needs is a unit to be scrutinizing what comes in much more efficiently.
All right. On that note, it's time for another break. We'll be right back. Ulunaka, and welcome to For the Record. Tonight on the show we're talking about the World Consumer Rights Day, and in studio with us we have the Chief Executive of Consumer Council of Fiji, Premila Kumar, and from Diabetes Fiji, Dr. Wahid Khan. Why, you ask? Well, it's a very valid reason. The theme for this year's World Consumer Rights Day is a consumer's right to healthy food. Healthy foods, of course, referring to a lot of the processed foods that we get today, and whether we understand what's on the labels and how nutritious these meals are. And we'll get right into it. First of all, Premila and Dr. Khan, thank you for being on the show with us tonight. Of course, very pertinent theme for this year's World Consumer Rights Day, a consumer's right to healthy food, especially in this day and age when a lot of people rely on processed food and they don't actually know what's in it or how nutritious it is at the end of the day. Premila, from the Council's point of view, I'd like to find out why or in what area we need to make a push so that consumers do get healthy foods.
From the Council's perspective, when I talk about the Council's perspective, this is in total all the consumer movement globally is expecting a change in the food label. What the consumer movement is saying, it's all good. The food nutrition label is on the food items. But the question is, can people understand? do you understand what it means? And generally it's found that it's just a requirement which most food industry has met because it's required under the Food Safety Act. So they have put the label, but whether that label is making sense to the very people who are buying the food products is not taken into consideration. So there is a push from the global movement that whatever information is on the food labels must be understood not only by educated consumers, but even those who are less educated.
Well, fair enough. It's just a label at the end of the day.
Correct, because as you know, consumers have right to information. And that is the basis on which the consumer movement works. In other words, all those traders and service providers who are selling goods and services, only they have the information, not the people who are buying. We would love to have that goods or services, but we don't know how it works or what it's all about. So from the right to information perspective, there is a call for a change in the food labeling so that people can understand. And at the same time, there is also a call for WHO to look at this issue more seriously, and they're asking for a global convention on healthy diets. Because over the years, we are not seeing any decrease in non-communicable diseases. Not a single country has succeeded, but what we can see is increase in that area. So if governments have failed, the food industry is not doing what it's supposed to do, then obviously there'll be the very people who are affected. They need to come on the scene and say, hey, but we want this change.
Non-communicable diseases you mentioned, and that's where Diabetes Fiji ties into this whole theme of World Consumer Rights Day. Dr. Khan, people not reading labels, what does that have to do in relation to diabetes?
Okay, it's not only reading labels, not understanding the labels. The labels are such tiny, they're in such small figures that you can't even see properly. I mean, you need to change your glasses if you're wearing glasses to go and put lens there and see the labels properly. And the nutrition information that is put there is not at all conducive towards a proper diet for people. If I'm a diabetic, I want to know how much of carbohydrate I'm taking in a meal or a off-the-shelf article that I'm picking up. If I'm a diabetic, I want to know what's the level of the cholesterol is in there, whether there's good cholesterol or bad cholesterol, you know. And it has to be obviously obvious to you that, hey, it's there, you know. It should be in writing, in a manner that it's clearly legible to me what I am going to take. As it is, you know, there is a paucity of materials for the diabetic. And I'm not talking only diabetics. I'm talking about NCDs too, because NCD diabetes go together. Be it so mad that I had the Diabetes Foundation, Diabetes Fiji, but my interest also is NCDs because we see a plethora of other activities, other illnesses which surround. Now, if you are a diabetic, you have a high cholesterol level, you have a high blood pressure problem, you end up with kidney failure, you can end up with heart failure, and together with that you have heart attacks, you know. So the majority of my patients who are diabetic or who are diabetic have a tendency to other comorbidities, co-illnesses. So it's very essential for us to make sure that they have the right kind of food in the right constituent of food. And they're able to make the decision, okay, this is not good for me, I'm not taking this material, I will opt for something much more better for me.
Do consumers actually read the labels? How many people go into the supermarket, pick up a product, and first look at what's in it? A lot of people, I would say, pick it up, put it in the shopping cart, pay for it, take it home.
Well, put it this way, why people don't read label? That is the question. The reason why they don't read the label, because they can't understand the label. How many people know what is sodium? You know, all those jargons that are used on the label, people can't understand that. And in the current form, the information is just provided, as I said, because it meets the legal requirement. Now we have to go beyond that. It's not a question of meeting the legal requirements. Even if the legal requirements were there, it was there for a purpose. And the purpose was for people to know. So we need to now focus on the purpose. Do people know? Is that the reason why they don't pick up or rather read the label? Now, how can we make them read the label? And there's a lot of changes happening around the globe in that case. For example, can we interpret the label already and put it in a form that I can trust that a nutritionist or some expert has interpreted and the information is right there? I can see it at a glance and say, hey, this is good for me. So this is the change we require. And it's going to be a long process.
All right, and on that note, we need to take a break. We'll be right back.